Good evening and welcome to Zoom In on a Fresh Conversation. My name is Donna Graybanks and I am your host. Our guest tonight, here's Mama Tony. Our guest tonight is the author of 5 nonfiction books, a guest lecturer, and has done podcasts and webinars at book conferences. She won first and second place writing awards from the Florida Authors and Publishers Association and the Royal Palm Literary Society. Please welcome Elizabeth. Is it Randall or Randall? Tell me how.
Randall.
Elizabeth Randall to Zoom In on a Fresh Conversation. Thank you for being here this evening.
Oh, thank you for asking me.
Zoom In on a Fresh Conversation is brought to you by Islands Diamonds LLC, Eldadero Press, Milton McCullough, Adante Production, say that 5 times, and the Fresh Book Festival, which will be held at the beautiful city of Daytona Beach, February 23, 24, and 25. I cannot believe it is coming so fast. Here it is, almost the end of November. Please join us. We will be in the Midtown Cultural and Educational Center and at Embry-Riddle University. So thank you for joining us there. If you have any questions for Elizabeth, please leave them in the chat room. We will have time for questions at the end. This conversation is being recorded. And good evening, Elizabeth. Please take a moment and give our audience a brief background.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm a retired school teacher. I'm 68 years old, but I've been writing since I was very young. I think I had my first poem published when I was 11 in a national magazine. But I didn't, I married young, I had a child, and I didn't think I could support us by writing. So I became a school teacher and worked in public schools for 15 years, and I was a corporate trainer for about 20 years. And so, but I always kept writing, and I published, I had I think 4 or 5 books published while I was working full time. And when I retired, I got 2 books out in 1 year. So that's a record.
So tell us how writing, did teaching enhance your writing, or did writing enhance your teaching?
Wow, that's a good question. Some of the good things about teaching and writing was that I was an English teacher, so I was exposed to literature all the time, really good literature. And if you're teaching it, you learn it even better. So that definitely, being exposed to so many authors was definitely a plus. And then the other thing I just thought of recently, I've been getting called a lot to do interviews and podcasts and some speaking engagements. And I thought, if I hadn't been a teacher, I never could have done that, or it would have been really hard. I mean, it's not easy anyway, but if you're not used to getting up in front of people, I don't know how I would have done it.
And so you said you've been writing a long time. What's a long time, and why nonfiction?
Well, let me go back to your first question.
Okay.
I just remember being in love with books even before I could read. I remember sitting, my father was a journalist, so I remember, yeah, and my grandfather too. I remember sitting as a very little child around a pile of books and just opening them and wishing so much I could read them. And so as soon as I was in school, I learned to read very quickly. And I've always been like a really big reader. So,
you almost couldn't, yeah, you had to be a big reader.
Yeah.
It was in your DNA, right?
I guess.
Not much you could do about it, right? Yeah.
I guess. And when I was very young, I started writing books in those, black and white notebooks. I remember I wrote this book about this family and illustrated it. And then when I was in 4th grade, we had a class literary magazine on ditto paper.
And yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I wrote the lead story for that. you know, so anything at school having to do with writing, I was always right in there. And as I said, I got my first poem published in Jack and Jill magazine when I was 11.
Oh, I remember Jack and Jill.
Yeah, I love that magazine.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was great. I wish they still had it. And then I won a ballad contest in fourth grade. And then, you know, I was always in the school literary magazine. And then later on, you know, I was teaching, and that's a really, really hard job. And I didn't have as much time for writing, but I always carved out some time. You know, I'd get up, it's when you're teaching, you have to be at school when you're at 6:30 in the morning. But I'd get up an hour early and write for an hour. And then I worked weekends too, writing, and all summer, because I had summers off once I started teaching public school. So I don't know. It's in your DNA, sure.
Yeah.
I come from a family of journalists, but at the same time, you're not going to be any good at it if you don't keep at it, you know. And so luckily, I always, you know, had this drive to do it. And I think the reason is because I do come from a family of writers. Obviously, nonfiction is my paternal influence. But I recently got a fiction book published, Fire is
Oh,
the Called, with Brother Mockingbird Publishing, a very small outfit in Mississippi. So that was exciting for me. And I'm already halfway through writing the sequel.
oh, I didn't see that book. Is it on Amazon? I guess I missed it. And when did you publish that one?
That one was published by Brother Mockingbird in October 6th, recently.
Oh, of this year. Okay. I must have completely missed it on Amazon, or it wasn't quite listed. I'm not quite sure, but good. So how was the difference? What's the difference?
It's really different.
The research, right, is
Yeah,
very different.
I'm I know Laura Lee Smith, who wrote The Ice House and Heart of Palm. She won the Florida Book Award one year. And, you know, I'm always like, I don't know how you write fiction. It's so hard. And she's like, I don't know how you write nonfiction.
Right.
It's so
It's so
hard.
hard.
You think it's hard?
Yeah,
I think
I would, yeah, I think it would be hard.
it's easier because you do, well, the way I did it was I do all my research, and then I, you know, all of it. Well, of course, stuff would crop up, but I'd get it all done usually during the summer. And then I'd spend the rest of the year writing the book, you know, and, you know, following up. And I had the dialogue all there. I had the facts all there. All I had to do was put my slant on it. With fiction, I had to make everything up.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. It really is true. But I guess if you use things from your own experience, if you grab stuff, it makes
Well,
it
you
a
did.
little bit easier, right? So you
You
don't have
did.
to do
In
as
fact,
much.
yeah, a
Yeah.
neighbor pointed out to me that one of my characters has the name that's suspiciously close to another neighbor, but it's just the name, you know, it's not the same name, but it's similar, but it's the character is nothing like her, you
Right,
know.
right.
It's the name it sort of sounded the way I wanted it to.
Yeah, so when you started publishing, let's start about your beginning process of publishing and what it's like now. And who's the creative person behind your covers?
Oh, well, I'm glad you asked me that because it's my husband.
Hey, Bob, good.
Is he there?
I think he's gone.
Oh,
So,
no. Um, we work as a photojournalist team, and he takes the pictures and for the nonfiction, and I do the writing, although he helped me with the fiction book a bit too. He's a good editor. He's got a great eye. And but he did the covers. And well, of course, you know, the publishing company does them, but they
yeah,
pick
but yeah,
work. And the cover I'm most proud of that he did was Murder in St.
I
Augustine.
love that cover. You don't
Where
have a copy of that book? Yeah, I know, right?
hang on a second.
It was in our advertising for you. Yeah.
Got it. It's right here.
Hmm.
Why isn't that coming up?
I don't know.
Hmm. Well,
Oh, there.
anyway,
Oh, you almost had it. No.
Do you see it now?
No. Mm-mm.
Oh, well, sorry.
Anyway, everybody saw it on the advertising. It was a good cover. Yeah, Murder in St.
Well,
Augustine.
he did this cover and he made it into a collage out of headlines from the true crime story I was writing about. And he spent a lot of time on it and it came out really well.
It did.
Now, History Press, for all their, not all, but most of their true crime books, they've copied that format.
Wow.
Yeah, if you look on History Press, you'll see that all their true crime books, a lot of them have copied Bob's format of making a collage of headlines and, you know, the pictures of people involved.
Yeah, I think that was one of my favorites. I like the one with the ghost background, kind of a house, and the white. What was it?
Women in White.
Yeah, I like that
Yeah,
one
I have
too.
authors schools in Nassau County for that book. I was really honored and surprised.
Yeah, I like that cover too. So that's your process. Your husband generally takes care of the covers. And let's talk about your publishing process. You have not been with the same publisher this whole time, right? So give us what it was like then and how it's changed since you've done this new publication.
Well, I think my first book was published I've been a freelance writer for a long time, but my first book was published in 2011 by, God, I can't even remember the name of the publisher. They went out of print.
Right.
They're Capstone now. It was before they were Capstone. And they published a book I wrote called The Floating Teacher, because my first year teaching,
You floated.
I did not have a classroom. I had a cart. And for 7 periods a day, I was running. And
Look at Mama Tony. She understands. Yeah.
Yeah, I was in my 50s. So it was, it was really hard. In fact, I did that for 2 years before I got a classroom. They do that to teachers. It's kind of like trial by fire, Or if you make it, then you're going to be a good teacher. So that was my second bout of teaching in a public school.
Teaching
but anyway,
by food cart.
that was my first book.
Yeah.
And it was and then my second book was Haunted St. Augustine and St. Johns County. And what had happened with that was I had written this 300-word book on ghost lore. I don't like to call it paranormal because it's really closer to history. I use the ghosts as a metaphor for history. But anyway, I had written this huge book and not on spec. I had gotten an advance for it. I'm not going to name the publisher.
Okay.
And they, at the last minute, they said, no, we don't think we want to do it. So I was crushed naturally.
You have to give the money back?
On this.
You have to give the money back?
No, they didn't ask for the money back. And I wouldn't have given it to them anyway.
No, right? No way.
Yeah, I earned it. So anyway, what I ended up doing was I chopped the big book in half, and half is Haunted St. Augustine and St. Johns County, published by History Press, and the other half was Women in White, The Haunting of Northeast Florida, published by Schiffer Publishing. But I published the St. Augustine one first because that was the easiest, because they wanted it fast. They published it fast. They did a pretty good job on it. Well, every book has some errors, that you find afterward, and you just agonize over. But at any rate, it still sells pretty well. So, and then like a year later, I got the other one published. It took longer because I had to find a market. History Press didn't want it because they're more regional. This covered several counties. So I finally got it published. About a year later. Oh, well, maybe it was 2 years later. I think it was in 2013. So.
And so you have a passage on your bio that says you interviewed prisoners on death row. you traipsed through haunted houses and camps and humid tents, and unpack how those things, how, how you did those things to get to this. First of all, I'm really interested on how you got into the prison system to talk to anybody on death row.
Well, I assure you, I was not on death row.
Oh, okay. Right, exactly. You weren't there. You were visiting. You were visiting for sure.
I was visiting. So, well, let me go back a little. I wrote a story called The Killer Inside. It was a cover story for Orlando Weekly. And it was about the Xbox murders in Deltona. Did you ever read?
Oh, those, yeah. There was a guy in his house and they came to his house and yeah. It was a long time ago though, yeah.
Yeah, well, I wrote the cover story on that, and I got exclusive interviews with Troy Victorino, who was supposedly the mastermind of the
Behind
murder.
it.
And the way I got to talk to him was because a neighbor of mine had a boyfriend who was in jail and knew him. And somehow we, gave him my number and we started talking. In fact, we're still corresponding all these years later. And one of the reasons I was so interested in the Xbox murder and murder in St. Augustine and true crime, although I've only written one true crime book and I've written 2 or 3 articles about it, but is because in my family, there was a homicide, an unsolved homicide. My father was killed in his Winter Park home in 1975,
Sorry.
and no one was ever charged with it, which is its own, brand of hell. So at least, some people, see some justice. But anyway, that's what got me interested in it, because I'm like, what makes a person commit these heinous crimes? I mean, there's got to be something. And just saying they're mentally ill is too
It's
easy.
not
Because,
enough, right?
yeah, not all mentally ill people are violent. That's ridiculous. So it's something else. And so I started researching it. I met Troy. I'm still communicating with Troy because I'm really interested in what makes a person do that. And what I found out from my research and my communication with Troy is that they're really not any different from anyone else. 3 things make people kill: greed, lust, or power. And
Oh, not money?
well,
Greed is the money. Greed is the money.
greed,
Okay. Yeah.
greed is the money. And so almost anyone, not everyone, but almost anyone would feel that impulse at
And
some.
drugs have nothing to do with it?
Well, drugs definitely lower inhibition. So drugs very well could have something to do with it, but not everyone who does drugs kills people either. So it's something else, and I think based on my research and the people I've talked to, that almost everyone is capable of it. It's just that not everyone has that impulse control that would keep them from doing that, or the morality to keep them from doing that. But
When you
another
spoke, I'm interested to just find out, when you spoke to Victor, did
thing,
he respond once it was all over? Was he surprised at what he had done?
he
Not,
has never admitted what he
oh,
has.
that's right. He did
Never.
not. Okay.
I really would like to call him on that, but he's on death row, and
Okay.
you know, and he has a new trial coming up in April, and
Right.
very likely he got life in prison. No, he got the death penalty, and then it was commuted to life in prison, and now he's going to have another trial, and he might get the death penalty again, probably will. So, but
that was a heinous crime that had no real reason to it. That's, I mean,
Yeah, that's absolutely right. But what I have found too is that there's no one in who can be solely judged by the worst thing they've ever done. You know, there's
oh,
always
I
more.
hope not. I hope I don't have to explain all that when I'm not explaining to do what I do. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Yes. Yeah. So it could be any of us at any given time, right?
That's my opinion. That's
Tam says she's been redeemed. Yeah. Yeah, I guess we all could snap at any given time, whatever that might be.
yeah, I think it has more to do with poor impulse control than anything else. So
So let's talk about how you write. Do you write in an outline? Do you write by scenes? Do you write by dates? How is it that you get through your process? Do you do your acknowledgement first and then start writing, or what is it?
oh no, my acknowledgement is last because I'm
Is
always but it's different for nonfiction and fiction. I'll tell you my nonfiction process and then my fiction process.
okay?
My nonfiction process, I get a box, and in the box, I start putting folders. Well, first I do make a list. I'm like, people I need to talk to, things I need to find out, places I need to go. And I make an extensive list. And then I start making folders, labeling folders for each of these items. And then I start going out and doing the research and filling up these folders and filling up the box. So in my house, I have a lot of boxes of
Sure.
research for books, and I never throw them out. And I'm not sure if I should. I might make my daughter donate them to a university when I'm dead. I don't know. But that's what I do. And then, you know, I gather all the research. I may write a little as things come to me, but basically I'm researching for 2 or 3 months, sometimes longer. For the Aklawaha book, it was a lot longer.
Mhm.
And then I start writing and I refer to my notes. And, you know, as I'm writing, I have an idea where I'm going, but that usually changes. Do you find that happens to you too?
No, my book is written from beginning to end. It's just a matter of me doing it.
Well, that's interesting because for
Yeah.
me, it's kind of organic. You know, sometimes I'll like, oh, wow, that I need to go more in that direction. So anyway, that's my nonfiction process. And then I have Bob, then I, you know, edit it 400 times. My editor edits it, Bob edits it. I give it to some other people to edit it, and it'll still be published with one glaring error at
War and
least.
Peace had glaring errors.
But now fiction is a little different because I've had ideas in my head for fiction for many years. As a matter of fact, I have at least 4 unpublished fiction books. This is the first one I've gotten published, Fire is the Test of Gold. And what happened with Fire is the Test of Gold was I didn't have a book contract, but I knew I needed to be writing. And I had this idea for a book based on something I read in a newspaper about 2 men who went off in a flimsy boat and hit a squall and were never heard of again. And they never found the boat or the men. All they found was a little tackle box. And so I thought, well, how could that happen? You know, presuming they didn't drown. Where did they go? Why did that happen? What did they do? Why did they go out in such bad weather? You know, so I wrote the book about how that could have all happened. And there's a little bit of paranormal in it. It's a little bit of erotica. There's a mystery. There's a murder. I just threw the kitchen sink at it.
Absolutely.
And then I rewrote it at least 12 times, at least, because I had a really good editor who kept sending it back to me, which I wasn't used to, but it was good that she did because every time she did, I found something else I needed to do. And then I had Bob go over it, and he's just a wonderful editor. I had a car in there. I forget what kind it was, but he's like, they don't make cars in that color for that year. And I never would have known that,
Oh, right. That's what a good editor does. I think I had bottled water in one of my scenes, and they were like, yeah, nobody had bottled water in 1982, unless it was Perrier, and who could afford that? They were going to the refrigerator to get bottled water. So, yeah.
Oh, wow. That's funny.
Yeah, I mean, we take that for granted right now, but really back in the 70s and the 80s, it was rare for you to have bottled water.
But I had a different experience with this fiction book because I've already told you that I find it very hard to make everything up.
Mm.
But for some reason, and I've written a lot of books where I would stop after 30 pages because I would just be stuck and I was sick of it and I couldn't think of anything else to do. I have so many books like that. And then I have 4 finished fiction books that I could never get anyone to publish. So with this one, though, I really got involved with the characters and I kind of knew what they wanted me to do with them. I know that sounds weird, but
No,
that's
that's what I'm saying. So my books go from, they're all hanging out saying, it's my turn. It's my turn. It's my turn. Right. So
right,
yeah, that's
right,
what, that's what
right. They're
happens.
like,
Yeah.
well, what about so and so, and it's like, oh yeah, they've got to do this. And yeah. And so then when I finished it, I found I couldn't let those characters go. So I started right away on a sequel.
So that's what fiction writing does for you as opposed to nonfiction. Nonfiction has a beginning, a middle, and pretty much an end, right? When you're writing fiction, this sequel, I was going to stop at 3. Now it's at 4. Now I think it's going to be like 6, right? Because, you have characters to write about. And I think you'll enjoy it. I think you will enjoy your fiction writing. And you should go back and grab those ones that you started. And no, they're dead. That's a dead.
One of them, I think, is good enough to be published, maybe, but nobody's ever wanted to publish it. And if this fiction book doesn't sell well, I'll never publish another one, I'm sure. So
if it's a good book, even on it, you wouldn't consider doing what is that thing on Amazon where you kind of just upload it yourself? It's not very expensive.
direct publishing.
Yes.
Yeah, I would. It's just that I don't think anyone would read it. I mean, how did you market your books?
You don't put it out there, you won't know that.
Right. You won't know. Mama, you used to be on mute. What are you doing?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
No, that's
Put yourself on mute for me. Come back on, Elizabeth. Are you there, Elizabeth? Come back on. Okay, good.
Okay.
Yeah, so you never know who's going to read it. Erotica has its own group, right? You either read it or you don't. And so it's a real, I don't want to call it a tunneled group of people, but you have an established group of people who are going to read erotica. And if you throw in some murder and you throw it into DC, then that's even better, right? Because everybody wants to know about DC, even if you've never lived there, right? And so, yeah, you just have to find your tribe. And you're not going to find your tribe if it's sitting on your desk.
I don't know how to find my tribe, though.
Yeah, you will as soon as you decide
Sure.
to do it. Because, anybody who read Zane, I was with them. Anybody who read, you follow people who write the same kind of books, right? On IG, on Twitter, and you get to, just follow them and people follow them and then they follow you, right?
Okay. Well, I only, my book.
It's a lot of work. I'll just tell you that. If you're not willing to do it, then.
Well, what do you do? You just spend a lot of time on Twitter and
you have to spend a lot of time on the computer.
On the computer,
Yeah.
looking for places to promote your book.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
As opposed to having a publishing house that would do it for you, right?
Well, they don't do it for me, believe me. They do some, but not, a lot of it's up to me. That's why I'm doing this.
Right. Well, and then like Tam said, hire a PR person. They're pretty good now. You can get those. You can get an assistant online who will do all the Twitter stuff for you, IG, LinkedIn, and you know, they have a nominal fee, not nominal fee, but they have a fee. But sometimes that fee is worth paying when you know you don't have the time. But you know, you'll decide what you want to do. So let's talk about your process. You didn't tell me. So your outline, you do scenes, you do dates. How, you know, I know you have these folders with all this stuff in it, but what comes first? Or what do you decide? Okay, so somebody's dead. You got a dead person right here, right? So do you go from dead person forward?
Well,
Or do you go from, go ahead.
the true crime book, I knew I wanted to start it with the murder because the murder was so unusual. I knew it would grab everyone. This socialite and former actress and present day realtor living in a mansion in St. Augustine was attacked with a machete on her front stoop and practically beheaded in broad daylight.
Wow.
And so I started with that. I knew I wanted to start with that. And then I did a little history of the, you know, the setting, you know, history of the city where she
Where it
lived.
was, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. And then I just took it piece by piece, you know, then the police work. I had an awful lot of paperwork from the St. Johns County Sheriff's Department for the murder in St. Augustine book. They were very helpful. And the thing about this story, this true crime story I wrote about, Athalia Ponsell Lindsley, St. Augustine's still really interested in this story. I get a lot of speaking engagements in St. Augustine on this. You know, they can't get enough of this story. And I think it's because it's just so unusual and it's technically unsolved. I mean, if you read the book, you know who did it, and everyone in St. Augustine knows who did it, although he was never convicted. So, you know, I went to the police work and then I interviewed people. At that time, there were still people alive in St. Augustine who were around at the time of this 1974 murder. And I spent a lot of time in St. Augustine just talking to them. And a lot of them said, do not use my name. And I'm like, well, you know,
That was one of my questions. How do you get permission from people? Yeah. You're
yeah,
talking about, yeah.
fiction book, but they're like, no, you cannot use my name. So I would just say a friend of so and so, or you know, a citizen told me this or that. But it really gave me a lot of insight, and I got some really good stuff because people were really anxious to talk about this. I think it kind of traumatized everyone.
I'm sure you're out sitting outside your house and yeah, and that was not a middle class neighborhood. That was a upper middle class neighborhood. So
It was,
yeah.
yeah.
And so you're sitting outside and you get chopped up by a machete and then nobody knows who did it, or whoever did it doesn't get charged. Yeah, that's something that, you know, think about, right? Yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah, it was a compelling story. It kind of, you know, it was a private crime that became public arena, and it still is to this day. You know how people still talk about Marilyn Monroe, you know, well, that's kind of what this crime is like. They're still talking about it,
was she a
you know.
socialite? Like a family
Yeah,
history legacy,
yes,
right?
very
So that's it.
very attractive. She was a Powers model, you know, but she was very unpopular in St. Augustine because she was way ahead of her time. She didn't behave in the feminine way that people thought that she should. She wouldn't sit down and smile and shut up. So,
Oh, yeah. Still have that problem, but that's a whole nother story. That's a whole nother zoom in on a fresh conversation. How women have to be thought of in a certain way, right? So,
especially in 1974.
yeah, yeah. that book still does well, you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about the women in white.
Mm-hmm. That
Let me
book is just starting to do well.
yeah, right. I mean, you just never know, right? You just never know
Yeah.
how that's going to work. And we talked about the cover, which I really, really liked. And so
Oh,
just
I
give us,
saw Bob that he did the cover.
yeah, I really love the cover. So just give us a little snippet about Women in White. I just love the haunting look of it.
Well, I began Women in White and Haunted St. Augustine with a ghost story because, again, I like to reel people in, and they're going to start with something interesting. And the story of Women in White is that throughout the world, people have claimed sightings of ghostly figures, usually women in white. You know, they're wearing shrouds, or some of them are nurses, or some of them are brides. But you know, it's always a woman in white. Not always, but a lot of
Right.
times.
Yeah.
You know, and the wind is fluttering her clothes and all that. So I just thought that was a strange phenomenon. And I started thinking about, why do we have ghosts? I mean, how many people have seen ghosts? Have you ever seen a ghost?
I've seen I don't know, I don't call it a ghost. Do you call it a premonition? Is that the same thing?
Well, that's definitely ghostly.
It's ghostly. Yeah, I believe I've been visited. Yes. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I've had some strange things happen to me too, but to say I'd ever actually seen a ghost, and maybe we wouldn't even know a ghost if we saw one, you know, but I have never actually seen a ghost. Bob and I call ourselves, my husband, ghost agnostics, because we believe they may exist, but we're not absolutely sure because we haven't, you know, we've seen some weird things, but we haven't actually seen a ghost. So I use the ghost stories kind of as a metaphor for memory and for history. And Women in White, I cover Clay County, Green Cove Springs, Nassau
Ah,
County, Amelia Island, and Fernandina Beach, Duval County, of course, Jacksonville, Flagler County. I'm trying to think, that may be it. Oh no, I cover Alusty.
mm.
So, um, well, yeah, I forget what county that is. Is that Bay? I'm not sure. But so I cover all those counties, and that's why I couldn't take the book to History Press, because I didn't have enough for any one place, and they're very regional at History Press. They won't do more than one place at a time. So I was lucky that Schiffer took it. And I liked Schiffer, except they had weird formatting. I spent a lot of time reformatting the manuscript, but it came
Right.
out good. I liked the way they laid it out. And I liked my editor, Dinah Rosenberry. She had a great name. And so the book, oh, and you know what else they did? Right before it was published, they sent me a copy, an advance copy, and a bottle of wine.
Oh, how nice.
I thought that was so nice. I
It
never had
is.
like that before. So they did that. And
And so, Elizabeth, when you went to all these places or wrote about all these places, did you have actual people saying that they saw women in white? Okay. And what those experiences were? And did they give them names of people that they knew? Okay.
well,
Or family members who
clarify,
came back? Or
not all of the stories in Women in White feature a ghost who's a woman in white. Some of them do, and a lot of the ghosts are women. But like, for example, in Neptune Beach, which was Duval County, I think, there was a restaurant called the Homestead Restaurant, which was notoriously haunted. I mean, for decades. And it's because the woman who owned it initially, I can't remember her name. It starts with an A. I remember that. She supposedly haunted it. And she wore white. She was a woman in white, and people would see her in mirrors, and they'd see her at the top of the stairs. And there was one really spooky story the owner told me where some of the guys, the restaurant guys, were out back playing basketball, and the ball went into the woods, and one of the guys went in to get it and came back out and just dropped the ball and ran home and never came back. And so they ended up calling him, and they said, hey, don't you even want to get your check? And he goes, yeah, well, you can bring it to me because I'm never coming back there. And he told them that when he went to get the ball, he saw a woman in white kind of struggling out of the ground, like she was emerging from a grave. And so they all say that the owner of the Homestead restaurant wasn't buried there, but this guy swears that that's what he saw, and he was really scared. They'll attest to that. So
I think it's in Savannah where they say that woman comes out to greet the ship, right?
oh, in Pensacola? No, wait, where?
I think it's Savannah, Georgia.
Oh,
Where her,
probably,
yeah, that's the women that
Or
one of the
waves
women,
to
and
the
yeah,
ship. Yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah,
saw that
yeah.
statue when I
It's
was,
supposed to be a woman in white too.
yeah. Oh, yeah, and there's a woman in white at the gate in St.
Right,
Augustine too. It's a
yeah,
kid,
yeah.
nightgown, died of yellow fever. Yeah.
So, I'll just say that I believe that we all can't be wrong. Everybody can't be seeing these things, and they're just
Well,
not there.
yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, the people who have told me their ghost stories they were not putting me on. They were very sincere. In some cases, they were really scared. So, I just put down what they told me. I went on a few ghost tours too. I got some information from that as well. And I hope, I do see a ghost. I did see one thing. Bob took a picture in the Book Loft, which is the bookstore in Fernandina Beach on Central Avenue, the main drag. And there's a really weird orb in the picture. The room is dark, except for this one glowing piece of light.
Is it green?
No, I don't know. It was our pictures. We have to do black and white, so I don't know what it was initially, but I don't think it was green. It was kind of white. And the owner of the books loft had told me that on the upstairs she would come in and all the books would be piled up on a table, or the chairs would all be upside down. So there was something going on there for sure.
So what's next for Elizabeth?
Well, I have a couple of ideas for a nonfiction book, but I haven't started them yet because when I finished, I had 2 books published this year, and that was a lot of work. I mean, I've never really done 2 at the same time. I've been like finishing up one and starting another one, but this was a lot of work. So I'm kind of taking a break, but I have 2 ideas for 2 nonfiction books, which I'm not going to mention so no one takes my ideas. And I'm working on the sequel to Fire is the Test of Gold. So buy Fire is the Test of Gold, and by next year, if all goes well, maybe the sequel will be out.
And you already started it, right? You already started the sequel.
I'm halfway through. Okay. I'm running into a bit of a block though, but I'm hoping I'll overcome it. So.
Well, is there anything else that you would like everyone to know? I'd like everyone to know that Elizabeth is coming to the Fresh Book Festival. Yay. And we're so excited ever.
Oh, yeah. And I send out a monthly newsletter. So if you would like to be included on that.
Oh, please do. And then I'll give it to everybody else. So everybody will know who you are by the time you get there.
Great. Yeah, my email. So should I say it, or do you have it? Or
you can say it because it'll go in the recording and everybody will know. But for me, if you would just put me on the list automatically.
Oh,
I'd appreciate that.
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's ELIZRAND@hotmail.com.
Oh, that's so funny. I gave that to a young man in a store and he said, "What is that?"
Do you know what someone said to me today? They said there's still Hotmail.
He said, "Ma'am,
Email.
what kind of email address is that?" I said, "Well, just write it down." But yeah, they're young people who have no idea what Hotmail is, right?
Maybe I don't know. I can't get rid of it. I've had it for 25 years.
Absolutely. I have no idea what that is. Who asked you about your Hotmail? Somebody recently?
Yeah, who was is somebody who wanted me to I'm trying to give all my books away. I have like 1,500 books. My house looks like yours, I think, a library.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Um, so I'm thinking, I really need to get rid of most of these, just save the first editions and the sentimental value. So I'm trying to donate them to prisons because
Ah,
I know that inmates read a lot
they
and
do.
it's good for them to read. So that's what and I finally touched base today with a woman. It's really hard to get anyone to answer their phone or get back to you. And her name is Jennifer Shillot, and she's going to work with me. And I'm very excited about that. But she had never heard of Hotmail, or she had, and she wasn't aware it still existed.
Yeah, I think you have more success with the private prisons than a state prison. A GEO prison, they're more open and receptive to those type of things. So if you keep plugging along, maybe one of those will decide to come on board with you. But it's not an easy process. Trust me, it really is not. And it should be seamless. I mean, why wouldn't you want them to read, right? What else they got to do?
It's good for them. It gives them new
Exactly.
ideas. It gives them different perspectives. Probably a lot of them. I worked with this prison book program in Pensacola a little bit. I used Open Book, I think it's called. And I would volunteer, and they send books to prisoners. Prisoners send in requests, and they send them books. And I think that is just the greatest
It's
thing.
the greatest thing.
Yeah, because a lot of them are trying to learn things they can do when they get out. So.
Yeah, I wish you luck on that because that's a very important project, really. And so we ask each of our guests for a pearl of wisdom. And so we will take one from you now, Elizabeth.
What was that?
A pearl of wisdom.
Oh, a pearl of wisdom. Well, this is one that comes to mind immediately.
Okay.
Writers read a lot and writers write every day.
Say it again.
Writers read a lot and writers write a lot every
day. Thank
Mm.
you. If you're going to be a writer, you have to write something.
Mhm.
Don't let a week go by without writing something, everybody. If you really want to be in the industry, you have got to write something sometime during a day, a week. Don't let it get past you because that's your learning process. Elizabeth, thank you so much for being with us this evening. And to our audience, when the lights go out and the cell phone towers go down, all you have left is a flashlight and a good book. So thank you, everybody. Elizabeth, I look forward to meeting you at the Fresh Book.
You too. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
And thank you, Bob, for being online. If you still are here, I can't see you, but thank you for being here. And your work is fabulous. So
It is.
it
All
is.
right.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Good night.